Welcome to Care Answered's webinar today. So glad you could join us. My name is Nicole Christensen. I am the CEO of Care Answered, which provides patient advocacy and care coordination, navigating people through the healthcare system. And our mission is to access the best care for all of our clients while giving loved ones peace of mind and empowering all patients. And I'm very excited to have our two guest speakers today because this is a topic that is very relevant. I've seen a lot of it with clients who have called. And so I'm going to give you a few facts about kind of this growing trend, right? And what they call the silver divorce, or people potentially getting divorced later in life, or perhaps they didn't get divorced later in life, but they did divorce and they have a blended family now. And what happens is for everybody, care happens, and the need for care and planning for it for all of our lives to have the best lives that we can and the quality of life we want does take planning. And surprises in this regard are not necessarily great. So let me give you a few stats and then I'll introduce our fabulous presenters. So what I did find is, according to AARP, baby boomers are the most divorced generation. So it's, again, a growing trend. But I did also read that it's likely going to remain just a thing about older adults right now. It may not be the same way later for many reasons. But 40% of those getting divorced are 50 and up, ages 50 and up. And divorce rate is higher if a wife develops a disability or chronic illness, not so much if the male spouse does. And for either spouse, it seems that there is a decrease in wealth at about 50% for either spouse. So this has financial implications. It has so many implications. It touches all of us, emotional implications. And then again, our resources are our network of people to provide care and add quality of life. It all changes when we have life changes. So it's really great to plan. So who we have here in our village of Care Answered, we have Marcy Goldfarb, and I'm going to read an introduction. She's a great person and a great friend and very knowledgeable in her field, but I want to make sure I get everything right. So she is a partner at Schwartz Ettinger, where she focuses on all aspects of trusts and estates, including estate planning, asset protection, and probate matters. Marcy distinguishes herself by ensuring each client's unique needs, objectives, and goals are met with precision and care. Her secret is a mixture of experience, diligence, and true commitment. So I can attest to that from knowing Marcy. So, and she's excited to be here, and we're excited to have her. And then we have Donna Lascala. Let me advance this as well. Donna Lascala. She's got a whole alphabet after her name. So she says CDFA and RFC, and is the president of Comprehensive Divorce Solutions, LLC, and has been in the financial services industry for 30 plus years. As a certified divorce financial analyst, Ms. Scala is dedicated to enhancing the divorce experience for her clients and the other professionals they work with. In the capacity of CDFA, Donna performs asset valuations to ascertain equitable distribution of those assets, provides pre- and post-divorce financial planning, and supports clients in building a roadmap for their post-divorce financial future. And again, I can attest to Donna's great excellence in her field of work. And just a wonderful person and supporting her field in so many ways. So I'm very excited to have you both here. I'm going to ask Marcy to start, if you don't mind, and tell us more about just preparing for any kind of aging, right? Hopefully we all get to. What are some things that you have in place? What are you seeing? What do you want us to know so that we can be best prepared?
Okay, here we go. Nicole, thank you so much for having me. I've known you for a long time, and it's a pleasure to be here today with all of you. So, as part of my practice, what I do is when someone comes in and we talk about what do they need, what documents do they need in terms of their estate planning, it's usually a will, and it could be a revocable trust, and we do some um, estate tax planning as well if there is a need for that. And along with the will and the revocable trust, there are documents that are even probably more important that we do with each client. I actually consider it malpractice if they're not done. We need to do a power of attorney, we need to do a healthcare proxy, and we need to do a living will if a client wants a living will. So a healthcare proxy is the document that allows you to name someone to make healthcare decisions for you if you cannot make them for a short period of time or an extended period of time. And you would tell your agent what your wishes are, and you would have these discussions with your agent beforehand so that if you are unable to make any kind of planning or decisions about your medical care, your agent who you select will know what to do. And if you want to have a living will, which says that you are not to be kept alive by artificial nutrition and hydration, then your agent should know that as well. And they actually work hand in hand. Some people worry about having the living will that, the agent's going to give it to the hospital and they're going to terminate your life too early. But what I always recommend is that you just keep that on the side. Your agent knows where it is. They don't have to present it to the hospital until the time is necessary. That comes, that is what you want, whether it's upon two doctors certifying that you're not going to recover to a cognitive state or some other standard. But that document does not have to be given to the hospital when an individual goes to the hospital. That's for your healthcare. And then on the other side of that is your power of attorney. Your power of attorney is a document that allows people to make your agent to make financial decisions for you on your behalf. And our form is very, very, very broad. They recently changed the form. We actually add in a lot of modifications. We allow for your agent to do all kinds of planning for you, whether it's Medicaid planning or trust planning. Because if we don't have that in place for you and something happens and you become disabled, we have to go to court and have somebody appointed as the guardian of your person and your property in order to take care of any of your financial needs. That is very costly. It's intrusive. The court's involved in your life for the rest of your life. And you have to tell the court, you have to account to the court every year for what you've done in terms of that person's money and their estate, and it's invasive. This can all be forestalled with a simple power of attorney, which actually isn't so simple. They could be 12 to 14 pages, but it's very, very important to have those documents in place. In a blended family, we actually had something happen that was very, very interesting. A client came to me, and she was in a second marriage, and they had been married for 20 years. She has children from her first marriage, and he has children from his first marriage. And the client, did not get along with the children from his first marriage. They were fine, but they battled a little bit in terms of caregiving to the husband, father, as he became progressively worse in his Alzheimer's diagnosis. So the client, previous to coming to see me, had thrown her hands up and said, I don't want to fight with them anymore. I don't want to make any decisions anymore. I don't want to be his agent on his power of attorney. I don't want to be his agent on his healthcare proxy. I'm going to let his children, be named. And this was in the beginning of this gentleman's diagnosis, when he was able to still make such decisions. And he did change his power of attorney knowingly, and changed it to his son, and then his alternate was his daughter. Sounds great in theory, in practice, not so much. So what happens is, as he becomes more and more disabled, he's still living with my client. So all the decisions that are being made for him by his children are affecting my client, whether it's when he is going to be moved to an assisted living, whether or not there's going to be an aide placed in the house to live with him in the house, which is going to be living with her as well. Whether or not he's going to be able to go out to lunch when my client knows him and knows that he can't really sit in a restaurant anymore. These children are not really, they're not seeing him on a day-to-day basis, a minute by minute basis. And their perception is different than her perception. So first of all, his care might not be best served by his children who are not living with him on a day-to-day basis. And second of all, the decisions that they're making are affecting my client in a way that is not anything that she thought was going to happen. The person who represented her and allowed her to write these, actually, my client was a lawyer. So she wrote up the documents and had somebody review them and explain to her what could happen. But she just did not want to hear it. And this is what happened. And now there's a very big problem because they want to move him out of the house and they want to move him into an assisted living facility. And she loves him. He loves her. He still knows her. She doesn't want him to move out and she doesn't have any say. So could she go to court and fight it? She could. And she could go and apply to be the guardian of his person and his property, the same as what I was talking about earlier. It would turn into a protracted litigation. And even though they do have the resources to handle that, she doesn't have the stomach for it. And she doesn't want to put him through that. So right now, this is where they stand, but this is a problem that happens in a blended family. So it's something to think about. When my clients come to me and they talk to me and they tell me what their situation is, I like to listen to them. I want to hear what they have to say. I want them to tell me what is going on. I want to educate them so that I can say to them, yes, you may want to do this, but here is what could happen. So these conversations with the power of attorney and the healthcare proxy come up very often. Another thing that comes up very often in a second marriage is what happens when you have the spouses of the second marriage each have children from their first marriage in terms of finances. So each person comes to the marriage with their own set of finances and whatever it is, good, bad, or indifferent. And when you first get married to your first spouse, you might make what's known as a sweetheart will. Sweetheart will says, I leave everything to my spouse. And when they die, they're going to leave everything to the children. You can't really do that in a second marriage. Time and time and time again, I see this, and I have seen it. I saw it first with a friend of mine, and then I saw it with even my own family, and I see it with clients. What happens is if you leave everything to your spouse in a second marriage with the expectation that upon the second to die, that spouse is going to leave everything to all of the children equally. Many, many times after the first spouse dies, the second spouse changes the will. And the children from the first marriage get nothing, which is not what is intended for the most part. So what do we do? How do we help a family that might end up in a situation like this? One of the ways that we handle it is we talk to them about splitting the assets 50-50. And each party can make their own trust, their own revocable trust, and they can control who their assets are going to go to upon their death. So for instance, if we have a couple, they each make a revocable trust, they bought a house together or they're buying a house together, we move the house separately, 50-50 into each trust. And each trust will have language in it that upon the first person to die, the second person is allowed to live in the house. They have to pay the expenses, or the expenses can be split between the two estates, the estate of both spouses. If any capital improvements are made by the spouse who is still living, they will get a credit for that when the house is eventually sold. If the second spouse wants to move, the proceeds from the sale of the first house can be used to purchase the second house, and in the same percentage as what the ownership was for the first house. And then upon the second spouse to die, the asset is actually in two separate places. So when it finally gets sold, half of the asset goes to the revocable trust for spouse A, and half of the asset goes to the revocable trust for spouse B. Therefore, you are preserving your assets for your children. Now, as you are living with your second spouse, yes, you're going to want to make provisions for your spouse. If you're living with somebody for, could be 20, 30 years that you're married to your second spouse. And certainly you can have accounts, you can have whatever you want. You could give the house, but you could make provisions so that you know that your children are taken care of. You can also have certain accounts that have designated beneficiaries, like your IRA. So if you want to have a house with your spouse, your second spouse, and you decide that that's going to be the asset that's going to go to either one, that nobody has the right to tell anybody what to do with it, you can do that. And then you can still leave assets to your children by way of designated beneficiaries on your IRAs or on other accounts. So the most important thing to realize is that it's a puzzle, and there are ways that we can help our clients. The most important thing is to listen and to help you understand what the parameters are and what can happen. One of the other things is just that I want to throw out there, as we're dealing with our aging parents, you really need to, as a child, get an idea of what it is that's going on with your aging parents' estate. So whether it's your in-laws or your own parents, you have to find a way to speak to people that they begin to trust you and they don't think that you're looking to take anything from them. But the questions are in a heartfelt way, can I help you? Where's your will? Do you have a safe? Do you have a safe deposit box? Do you have a healthcare proxy? Where is it? What do you want me to do if something happens to you? What do you want on your headstone? Where do you want to be buried? Do you want to be cremated? Do you have any ideas that I don't know anything about? Do you want to put notes on some of your items in your house so that we know who to give them to? So I tell my clients it's important to frame things in a question to your parent, to your in-laws. What do you want? Because that's their life. That's what they have amassed in their lifetime. So it shouldn't come across as what do I want? It should come across as what can I do to help you? So as a daughter-in-law, as an attorney, that's my goal. What can I do to help you?
That is excellent, Marcy. Thank you
Thank you,
so
Nicole.
much. That was
Thank you.
jam-packed with information. And one of the things that I know, I think we both experienced this, is unintended consequences, right? Like you were saying, it's not that somebody's out to get somebody, it's the conversation didn't happen, right? They didn't understand the consequences of what, not having this or having this or whatever it was would actually mean, right? And so one of those things, especially what you touched on at the end in regard to having those conversations, CareAnswer does that a lot too, right? It's like,
Yes.
we have the care control partners. These are regular conversations, and it doesn't matter how old you are, honestly. If you're above 18, these conversations of what you would want done or what medications you're on, I should say, and not or, and what medications you are, what diagnosis you have, these are so important because something can happen at any time, and hopefully it won't be anything. It'll be something that clears up and it's not a big deal. But that lack of information, that even small amount of no communication, can be really, really harmful. And then when you're talking about your whole estate and how you want things to be done after you're gone, there's no going back after you're gone. So it's just so important to have these conversations and speak with professionals that can walk you through it. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
So next we have Donna Lascala, who's going to tell us more on the financial side of these things. So Donna, take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Nicole, for having me today. And Marcy, you could not have teed it up better for me, because let's just talk about some of the things that you last said, which is the estate planning issues of some simple things like healthcare proxy and power of attorney. So a lot of people assume that your spouse is automatically those things. And it's not necessarily true. The document has to be specific as to who that person is. And this comes into play a lot more when you have these gray divorces and blended families. Because I always say to people at the end of the process of the divorce, please make sure that the divorce decree that you've just signed and the intention that you have agreed to matches up with the rest of your life. Because a lot of people forget, especially in a divorce where, you know, you've got children and maybe you're going to be in a second relationship. And a lot of times people come to me and they were already in a second relationship. No judgment, it's just the reality. And so we kind of know that very shortly down the road, there's going to be some issues that need to be addressed. So what does your will say? Because if you still have your ex-wife listed on your will as your ultimate beneficiary, unless you change that document goes to court and it causes lots of problems. So you have to make sure that everything you do matches up with the intention of the divorce. And what I mean by that is this: people think that, okay, I got divorced and now everything magically has changed. Well, let's talk about beneficiary designations. Marcy, you mentioned beneficiary designations. If you have a retirement account and your spouse is listed as the primary beneficiary, and now you are no longer married to that person, but you don't change the beneficiary designation, you pass away and that money is going to spouse number one, because the company that holds that money will always go by their paperwork first and foremost. And if the last piece of paperwork they had designates a specific beneficiary, I can guarantee you that the money is going to the person that's specified. Yes, it can be contested. Yes, you can drag everybody to court, but it's highly likely that that's what's going to happen. So you have to make very sure that, again, what you've intended is actually what is in the reality. So we talk a lot about title, and there's lots of different designations of title on financial accounts. You can have joint tenants with rights of survivorship. You can have joint tenants with tenancy in common. You can have transfer on death designations. All of these things, in addition to naming beneficiaries, has to again match up with what you're intending to have happen after you're gone. So it's very easy to change those things. It's just a form that has to be filled out for the place where your assets are held. So whether it's a bank or it's your HR department at work or it's your financial advisor in your brokerage account or your mutual funds, you have to make sure that all of that stuff is reviewed and reviewed again. I had a situation where ultimately a 23-year-old grandson and his 20-year-old brother were the ultimate beneficiaries of their grandparents' estate, because not only had their mom died, but her uncle, her brother, so their maternal uncle, and then both of their grandparents had passed away, but nobody had bothered to change the beneficiary designations on any of their accounts. And it was a nightmare for this 23-year-old who was then named as the executor of all of these estates and had to get everything in line so that the money would actually flow to him and his brother. So that's, you know, maybe a more extreme case, but it does happen and it happens every day. But let's get back to divorce for a second, because part of what we deal with, especially when there has been a long-term marriage, is that it's likely that there's going to be spousal support. It's likely that there will be child support. It's likely that retirement assets are going to be split. Now let's talk about New York, for example. New York is what's known as an equitable distribution state. That does not mean 50-50. It means equitable. So it does not mean that you go in, you have $500,000 of assets and $250,000 is going to each person. It's not what it means. We have to look at the lifestyle analysis of the family, of the couple. What assets are there in play? Who's getting what and why? Are there young children? Are there people with special needs? There's a whole host of things that goes into the decision about how those assets are being divided. But again, when we talk about retirement assets, most things like a 401k or an IRA, and I won't go into the alphabet soup of retirement accounts, but let's just work with those two because they're the most common. Usually those types of accounts are divided at the time of the divorce. So if there's $500,000 of a 401k and it's determined that the non-employee spouse is going to be receiving $200,000 from that 401k, that is in the agreement. You then get a court-ordered division of those assets, and the money moves without a tax implication or penalty from one spouse to the other at the time that the divorce is finalized, because it's a court order, it's a legal transaction. But now let's talk about something like a pension. You can do a pension valuation at the time of divorce, but the actual division of that asset normally happens way down the road, because you're calculating how much income each person is going to receive from that pension. So it's $4,000 a month. Spouse A, who is the employee, is going to get $2,500 of that $4,000. The non-employee spouse gets the remainder, the $1,500, based on a lot of calculations that go into this. It's the marital portion, what you're entitled to. But that doesn't happen now. It happens when that person is retired. So now let's fast forward. And that person, that employee that is entitled to a $4,000 pension, but is now giving away $1,500 of it a month to their former spouse, is married again. So the expectation of income in retirement is significantly different in this second marriage. Now let's add on to that healthcare. So you're talking about a healthcare expense that kind of usually comes out of the blue, and you start scrambling to figure out how you're going to afford to take care of the health of this person. But now you've got diverted assets. You don't have the $4,000. You're only going to be getting $2,500. You don't have your $500,000 original 401k. You only have $250 to $300 of it. And yeah, it's grown over time, but let's not even get into how that works. But the point is, you have less to work with in retirement and in order to take care of healthcare issues than you would have if you've never gotten divorced or didn't get remarried. There's lots of issues that have to be considered. Add on to that adult children, add on to that grandchildren. Have you made a commitment to put money away into a 529 for your wonderful grandchildren? Okay, well, what are we doing with that money? Is it being clawed back? Is it actually being given to the child? How does that work? How does that all factor in? And if you haven't considered things like a long-term care insurance policy or a life insurance policy with a long-term care rider in order to provide the money that's necessary for your care, you've got a lot of planning to do. And usually it's a scramble at the last moment. And that's when I have my clients call Nicole, because she starts pointing them in directions that can help with the thinking outside the box. And if they haven't already seen Marcy or someone like Marcy, they need to then go to someone like that who can say to them, okay, let's look at the possibilities and the considerations of the needs of this family. What else has been put into place? Was this house that you're still living in part of a previous divorce agreement that, and I see this a lot, even though I tell my clients, don't do it. They say, well, I'm going to live in the house for the next 20 years. And then when I go to sell the house, spouse number one, ex-spouse number one is going to receive the proceeds of the sale of this house. Oh, don't do that. Please don't do that, because it creates a whole nother ball of wax that needs to be dealt with. Because again, I forgot I had to do that. Oh my God. Or I didn't tell spouse number two, oh, by the way, you've now joined me in a house that I don't really own 100% of. It's a difficult conversation to have. Or there are family dynamics that come into play. So again, going back to the healthcare proxy and the power of attorney, in Marcy's situation, there were adult children that were put in charge. What ripple effect is that going to have that you didn't really intend for it to have? Who has control of the assets? Are all the assets in an irrevocable trust, a revocable trust? And I joke with all the the abbreviations. Sorry, my brain just went on pause. All of the abbreviations that we give for all of these letters that we associate with things, and the grats and the slats and all this crazy stuff, they all have a purpose, but you need to understand what the purpose is and what the ramifications are of each of these things and how they're all going to come together when you need them to. And is it actually going to do what you intended? So, we talk about the baby boomers, and it is very true that overall divorce rates are going down. But one of the reasons for that is because the millennials and the younger generations are either A, not getting married, or they're waiting a longer time to get married. So the biggest surge of divorce is the silver or gray divorce, however you want to phrase it. I like silver. It sounds nicer than gray. But you also have situations of domestic partnerships. A second relationship is not necessarily a marriage, but it's a domestic partnership. And that makes a lot of sense sometimes if there's a complex financial situation where the couple, maybe they're in their 60s when they meet and they come together and they decide, you know what, it's way too complicated to manage all of these moving parts. So instead of us getting married, let's just have a domestic partnership, which is valid. And there are things that you can do. You can have life insurance for each party on the other to take care of certain things. You can have legal agreements. Let's call it more like a prenup or a postnup that sort of lays out all of these things, but it has to match up with everything else that's already been put into place, because everything can be contested and you don't want your family to wind up in court and on television because it gets ugly. There have been stories lately of things happening where someone passes away and the adult children did not know that this was what had been intended, and it causes a huge, huge family feud. So you want to try to do as much as possible with the appropriate team in order to make sure that all the what ifs, as many as you can handle or think of and plan for, are actually even talked about. So it's all about having those conversations. And again, that's kind of where I go to Nicole and say, could you possibly have this difficult, icky conversation with this client and their family? Because I really don't want to have that conversation. And it sounds a lot better coming from Nicole than it will from me when I'm dealing with the money issues. So that's kind of my 2 cents about the situation and all the pitfalls that you can and should avoid when you've got a blended family. And, good luck. It's ugly out there.
Thank you so much, Donna. And again, it's a lot of these things of not thinking about, not just being, or, we know how love goes, right? You're you're in the next relationship and you're flying that, and then you forget about all the things, and then you find out later on. I've had many clients, going back to the statistics that I found, which I wasn't surprised about, that they didn't actually get divorced, right? They didn't go through that because that was another hassle, similar to what Marcy was telling us about. It seems like a hassle. You want to just take care of these things, and you're like, I don't want to do that. It costs money, all these things. And then next thing, again, it's often, well, it's every single time, I have to be honest, that this has happened, it's been the spouse, like estranged spouse, but spouse, female, that gets basically this person who was in their lives 20 years ago, they never got divorced from, or they didn't lay out things appropriately, or they were divorced, but they didn't they didn't make any arrangements for who would provide their care and think of those things afterwards. That ex-wife is still the healthcare proxy and power of attorney, never changed. That's a lot to have on your doorstep, especially when oftentimes, statistically speaking, that first marriage, they're about the same age. So somebody's coming to you at 75 when you're 75, and now you were busy taking care of yourself and whoever your loved ones are, and here comes somebody that's been estranged from you for 20 years that you have to take care of. So it's really, really important. And then the other thing, not to, keep on telling these things that you already probably know regarding women, is there's also the daughter's responsibility from whatever side of the family, doesn't matter. And so making sure the children, adult children, are aware of these things too. Gone are the days is that we make these information all secret, right? For those that you want to know, this information because it's going to affect them, bring them in. Again, these conversations about health and finances, the time for them to be secret is over, because when you're talking about them, if it's finance, these are things that you've worked or you've prepared for your whole life. This is whatever, if you were working and got saved this money, or you weren't working but your spouse was, you're still part of that money. So really discussing this with those that are going to be affected, even if those are adult children, not just the partners, it's just so important, because nobody wants to put that on people they love. Honestly, it's not fun. As Marcy was telling us about guardianship, I always say, there's an old phrase, it's cheaper to keep her, whatever. But what I say is, power of attorney is much cheaper than a guardianship. So have those conversations early and often. And same thing with healthcare proxy, right? If you're a healthcare proxy by surprise, which I've had as well, and the person doesn't really know what their loved one wanted, that's a horrible, horrible position to put somebody you love in. So these conversations and talking with these fabulous experts are really what you need to do pre-divorce even, or while you're happily married, have these conversations with both of them, because they can make the huge difference.
Well, Nicole, it's interesting that you bring up about, people remaining married even though they're legally separated. So it's a very odd term, legally separated, but there are a lot of people who decide for reasons of health insurance to remain married for a specific period of time.
Yep.
And it's usually, okay, we're in our 50s, we decided we're going to separate, but one person has the really great health insurance and we're pretty far away from being able to qualify for Medicare. So we'll just stay technically married, but legally separated until we get to the point where whichever spouse it is that turns 65 can go on Medicare. And how ironic is it that that's usually the reason that things backfire? It's because of the healthcare. So when you get to that point, you really have to think very seriously again. And I say to people, yes, you can make this decision and you can make this choice, but please understand that everything has ramifications. You know, it's what the laws of physics, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. It's the same thing with financial and legal decisions. Everything you do has an equal and opposite reaction, and you need to be aware. And I,
Right.
as you know, as a financial advisor, but also as a certified divorce financial analyst, it is my ethical responsibility to make sure that I make people aware of all the implications and all the ramifications of any decision that they're trying to make.
Right. And that's the thing, right? It's your choice is your choice, and I'm all for whatever choice you want to make. It's just the knowledge. You have the knowledge so that you're making the right decision for you. You know the ups and downs and all around. There's no perfect decision for every single person. But these questions are so important. Marcy, did you want to add something?
I just wanted to add also that it's important to let your clients know that in addition to knowing everything, they have to communicate it.
Yes.
So it's that the communication is also very key.
Yeah,
Some
absolutely.
people can't.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that communication tends to
And
be
that's
very
when you have a
difficult for
problem.
people.
Yeah.
That becomes very difficult. And so just let's all make it normal, because it's your life savings, it's your care, it's your health, it's the people you love. And these are just everyday conversations. We want to take control. We want to make sure that all of our hard work and all of our whatever we want to happen is actually happening, and we're making the steps, because not making a decision is of course a decision as well.
That's right.
So so does anybody have any questions? You want to put it in chat or take yourself off mute? We'd be happy to hear them. Let's see if we have any questions in the chat.
Hello.
Yes,
Hi, it's
Bonnie.
Bonnie. Yes, how are you? Thank you for
I'm
that great
well.
presentation, ladies. Everything that you said. Hold on. Let me just get my little Florida background here. So I feel relaxed during these stressful conversations.
Yeah.
But I will say a couple of things. Having been in the business of helping people with their financial plans and everything that was said is so true and so important. And I think the biggest problem is like you said, communication. I mean, I'm just going to give you a personal, because this could help other people. Like my parents are gone. Like, unfortunately, they left this world very early, but over 27 years ago. I was their executor. They had a will in Brooklyn. You know, they lived in Brooklyn. They sold their house in Canarsie and moved to sunny Florida. I didn't think anything of it at the time. I just figured, oh, the will just carries on and no big problem. And my mother used to have things on her refrigerator. Oh, no matter how well my children do, I want all my assets split equally. You know, that's another thing, because then there you have jealousy. And she always would say, like, you just never know where someone's future is going to wind up anyway. So I just want all my assets spread equally. Anyway, so they're gone, and we all get copies of, you know, I was the executor, I was the middle child, but because of my background, I was there. So my sister, we all get copies of the will, and they never updated their will when they went to Florida. So, meaning what they wrote in their will was, and to me, it was, you know, my relatives was pretty clear too. My divorced sister and her daughter was living in the house with them. So they kind of divided that house, assuming they were still living there, between all of us, and included my niece. And I would be okay with that. But subsequently, my sister remarried, my niece was living with them, and, you know, go on the whole, they sold the house and bought something in Florida. Now they die, they have the Florida house. We get the will. She's looking at the old, you know, the will that says her daughter should get part of it because of the old house. So this caused tremendous havoc. And plus, you know, I even said before, my mother, she was not doing so. I said, you want to do something separate for them? I don't care. I'm not jealous. Go take out CDs, put it in their name. And she actually did listen to me. And whatever that amount was that she would have gotten, I mean, it was in a CD, but they didn't want to hear from that. I said, they did something special for you. So the house would have been split between my brother and my sister and myself. It wasn't a lot of money. I think it came out to maybe $40,000 each. But so there is a big situation where nothing was again discussed, you know, that's one situation. you know, our relatives, close people, so we're not getting involved. You know, you're right, but we're not getting involved. We don't want to cause like more havoc than there is. And then the other situation I had with a client where two sisters, nothing was designated by the mother. She passes away. One sister has two daughters, and then it came to divide the jewelry, and these sisters were best friends, came to divide the jewelry. The one that had the sister said, I should be getting more for the girls. And the other sister said, everything should be split equally. And if I want to sell my part, that's up to me. Or if I want to give something to your daughters, that's up to me. It caused havoc. They hired attorneys. They never spoke to each other again. And we're talking about dollars. So many times it's, you know, so senseless where, trust me, my daughter came to me, let's go through your vault and tell me where you want your stuff to go. And I want to see everything in writing. And, you know, have things in packages. And what else I want to use them now? Just tough. So it's just like, you know, so I have that list, you know, I wanted to always like, you know,
That's really smart, because you're right. It has
you have to
divided
designate,
families,
and
and it's
and I was
not
like, you know, and I
necessary.
said, I never even, you know, we never even went further on this. I mean,
Hold on. Unmute.
I don't know how that happened.
Sorry about that.
Okay,
That was
so
me. I tried to click myself.
I'm
and it
not
didn't.
even sure if, listen, I've been paying the price ever since with my sister. It's like, I half support them anyway. That's not the case. Whatever that little money was, she's gotten it 100 times full, you know, over. I would never let them starve, but it's not the point. It's like having everything, like you said, updated and having everything work for the, you know, for the family. So these situations don't arise and they don't cause conflict. And everybody says, oh, don't worry, we'd never fight over that or fight. It's baloney. People fight over $1. I mean, I've never seen you know, I see it all the time. So having those documents and having the conversation is just, you know, so important. And, you know, in my practice, I do a lot of long-term care interests, and the families, when they have a claim, they're just saying they're so thankful. They said, I don't know what to do. The stress of this and the depleting my assets. I mean, this has been like a godsend. And then
Yeah.
but you
It's
just
that
never,
planning. It's that
it's
planning.
all about planning. And you ladies really hit the nail on the head with whatever you said.
Thank you, Bonnie. And I want to read out, Linda Martinez had to leave, but I am being asked to go see someone. I have to go. I just wanted to say thanks. And this is so relevant. I'm seeing a lot of this. And when everything is planned in advance, there's so much less stress for families, which is
Good.
absolutely true. And I just want to thank both Marcy and Donna for being here and sharing all of this great information, because it takes a village, and I'm really glad that you're a part of mine and Care Answered. And whew, it's a lot of good information. So
Thank
let
you
me
so
just
much,
go back.
Nicole.
Absolutely. Let me just go back to this so people have their information on screen to see, because they are a wonderful resource, and I strongly recommend you reach out to them for yourself, your clients, your friends, and family.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us, Nicole. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
It was great.
Have a great one.
Have a great day. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.